presenting on monitoring red-bellied snakes and prairie skinks at the SDSU Oak Field Station. Bruce is a professor at SDSU. His early training was in ornithology, but his broader interests include vertebrate ecology and wildlife biology. Much of his research has focused on overwater nesting marsh birds, especially grebes. Welcome, Bruce, and you are ready to go.
All right, thanks a lot. For those of you that attended the meeting last year, you may remember that I gave a presentation basically about the SDSU Oak Lake Field Station. And during that presentation, I mentioned that I started a project out there on red-bellied snakes and prairie skinks. I had just started at SDSU in May of 2019, and I was looking for a project related to herps to do out there. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've been finding. All right, so just a little bit of background first with regard to why I picked these two particular species. Part of it has to do with the fact that there isn't much in the way of species diversity for the eastern part of the state. This is a map from Drew Davis's website, the Amphibians and Reptiles of South Dakota. And if you take and you look at Brookings County, there's only 12 species that actually are present that are known to be in Brookings County. Of that 12, 6 are amphibians, 6 are reptiles. And as far as reptiles go, 2 of those are turtles. And then the remaining 4 are these species right here. So we have prairie skink, we have red-bellied snakes, and then 2 species of garter snakes. All right, the prairie skink found just in the very eastern third of the state. It's a species that generally is found in more grassland type habitats where soil is relatively loose, so it can take and dig down into the soil. Body length can get up to about 8 inches. Common garter snake, here you can see the distribution. Size in common garter snakes can get up to around 30 inches. And then we have the plains garter snake, which is much more widely distributed than the common garter snake. And it's about the same size, maybe about 28 inches in length. And then we have the red-bellied snake. And as its name implies, it has a reddish colored ventral surface, the belly area. So there's an individual right here. This is a species of special concern in South Dakota, so it is tracked by the Natural Heritage Program. You can see that there are sites in the eastern part of the state where species is found, and that is a subspecies, which is northern red-bellied snake. And there is another subspecies which was designated back in 1963 called the Black Hills red-bellied snake, and there's a disjunct population in the Black Hills area. So I'm focused on the Occipitomaculata subspecies in the eastern part of the state. Just to show you again, this is an individual that I found dead on the trail. This is 2 photos of it, so you can see the dorsal surface in the top photo, and then again, you can see the reddish color on the ventral surface. Just a location for the Oak Lake Field Station in the northeast corner of Brookings County right here. And this is Oak Lake, and so all this gray area right here is the footprint for the Oak Lake Field Station. So it's about 570 acres in size. Rangeland, about 72%, 13% wooded areas, about 8% for wetlands and 6% for cropland that we have there, and then about 1% are trails. So for my presentation, I'm just going to focus on this very small area right here at the station. There has been previous work done on red-bellied snakes at the station. There was an undergraduate student back in 2003 and 2004, Regina Cahill, who actually did a project on red-bellied snakes. And so this is part of the impetus for why I wanted to look at it, because I knew that it was present on the station. So during her project, what she did is she just used visual encounter surveys where she would walk around in the mornings and in the evenings looking for individuals. And because they're hard to find in grassy areas, they're easy to find when they're on a trail, but not so much when they're in the grass, she set up a series of drift fences with pitfall traps in order to take and capture individuals. As I said, they can be relatively easy to see if they're on a trail like this, but once they get into the grass, you really have a hard time seeing them. Cover. A lot of people will take and look for amphibians and reptiles underneath various types of cover. artificial cover and natural cover. So here's some examples right here with regard to looking under natural cover, looking under a log, looking under rocks. But of course, we have a lot of artificial cover out there people take and have old pieces of tin on their property, for example, so you can take a look under them, on old pieces of wood, and therefore you can take and find animals, amphibians, and reptiles that crawl underneath them. Cover boards have been used traditionally to survey amphibians and reptiles. This is a photograph from a study was done out east where they were looking at salamander diversity, and they put down a series of boards on the ground, which the salamanders would then take and use. For my project, I decided to use covered boards instead of using drift fence systems. And so I would just take and clear an area and then place a piece of wood down in most cases. The material that I used varied with regard to the sizes. It had to do with the fact that I was scrounging for wood out at the field station. And so there were a lot of old signs out there, which I found and cut up. And then I was using those to take and place on the ground. Most of it was wood, but some were metal laminated pieces of signs that I found. So these are just some examples then of the cover boards that I put down and the relative sizes of them. I placed these cover boards in 3 different areas, basically. I placed them along the trail, you can see right here. And then I had a break where it was more of a wooded area, and then I started up again and then went up, and this is again all trail system right here. So I ended up and placed 48 total cover boards down. This is a little bit closer look at the first series, about 10 meters apart that I placed them. And then this is the other area, and again about 10 meters apart with regard to placement of the boards. So when I would take and check my boards, I would use my cell phone and I would take and record video of my observations while I flipped the board up. And then that way I could take and view the video again later on in order to make some determinations about how many individuals might be under the board if I wasn't able to count them right away. So this is what I saw right here on the left-hand side. So here are 2 red-bellied snakes. Sometimes there would be a lot of snakes under the boards, garter snakes in particular, and I did not differentiate between common and plains garter snakes because sometimes it's very hard to do that while they're trying to take and get away from you. So here's actually a video clip to show you that particular board when I flipped it up, what it looks like. So here you got 2 red-bellied snakes, and here is 1 garter snake. Here's another one. In this one, there are 3 three prairie skinks, 3 garter snakes, and then there's a single red-bellied snake right here. Here's another one. You can see sometimes it can quite be a lot of activity underneath the board, so it can be hard to determine exactly how many snakes that you have. So by having video, then I could take a look at later. So I was able to determine for this particular one that there were 17 garter snakes and 1 red-bellied snake. Here's another one, 3 garter snakes and 13 red-bellied snakes underneath this one right here. And this one had 5 garter snakes, 1 red-bellied snake, and 2 prairie skinks. Okay, so with regard to the number of checks that I did, this graph right here shows 2019 and 2020. In 2019, I started this project in late July, so it wasn't a very long season. So I had a longer season in 2020 when I went from May 21st to November 7th. So in 2019, I had a total of 53 checks. So a check basically is just a period of time in which I went out and actually looked at all 48 of the boards. So you can see right here that there was a difference with regard to the number of checks that I had between the 2 years. And in order to do a comparison, since I had overlap here from July, August, and September, I've just kind of summarized some of the data with regard to just those 3 months. So here we have July through September, and you can see the number of garter snakes. And what I do is I represent it as a number per check. So the total number of individuals divided by the number of checks. That way I can make a comparison then between 2019 and 2020. So here you can see for each of the species, GS stands for garter snakes, collectively the 2 species put together, RBS for red-bellied snakes, PS for prairie skinks, and then just all of the reptiles together right here. And so there are some differences between the 2 years with regard to the number of individuals that I was seeing for each check that I did. So you can see here with garter snakes that I had higher numbers of garter snakes in 2020 for these months, and then overall with the 3 months combined versus 2019. Still some difference for red-bellied snakes, more so in 2020, not as much for the prairie skinks. And then overall, I had about twice as many individuals that I observed under the boards in 2020 versus 2019. Another way to take and represent this for all of the covered board checks for 2020. So here we have the average number of animals per check. So for garter snakes, it came out to 16.2. So again, a check is checking all 48 of the boards. So out of those 48 boards, on average, I'd have 16.2 individuals. For the red-bellied snakes, it was 7.1. For prairie skinks, it was 1.9 and 25.1 for all of them collectively together. As far as when I checked the boards, basically I divided it up into 3-hour time periods. Prior to this, I knew that from 2019 that generally morning checks and evening checks were the best times when I get the most individuals. So that's why I had a difference here with regard to total number of checks that I had during these 3-hour periods over the 2020 field season. And if we just take and we look at these time periods, basically you can see that I had more individuals underneath the boards when I would check in the evenings. So you can look across the values here. The only one that didn't really make much of a difference was for the prairie skinks. And then this is just 2020. I had 6 different days in which I actually did a morning check and an evening check. That way I would be able to compare the number of individuals. And you can just see the totals right here for the 4 different species put together, comparing morning to evening. And you can see that generally I had more individuals in the evening than during the morning. As far as individual boards go, there was a lot of variability with regard to how many individual animals were underneath any particular board. So this kind of summarizes the top 10 most performing boards, if you want to use that terminology, right here in this list for 2020, going from number 1, which was cover board number 4, going down to number 10, which was in 10th place. So it turned out cover board number 4 had a high number of individuals because there was a total of 175 garter snake individuals that I observed under cover board number 4 in 2020. Number 5 was the highest producer for red-bellied snakes with 111 individuals. And then for prairie skinks, 27, that was under cover board number 28. And then for compare it with 2019, the ranking right here. So it turned out that cover board number 4 ranked number 1, both in 2020 and 2019. And then you could see some of the others also fall within the top 10 as well in 2019. So again, some of those boards are right in this area right here. So this was a very productive area with regard to the number of animals that I found underneath the boards. How does this compare to what Regina Cahill found when she did her study? in May of through August of 2003, she found a total of 43 red-bellied snakes during that time. And she found them again because she was doing just basically visual surveys, walking around, and then she had her 6 drift fence systems. 2004, she found 32 individuals. Whereas just on June 15th alone in 2020 in the evening, my one check that day in the evening, I found 42 red-bellied snakes. 13 of them were underneath one covered board number 5.
Bruce, you have about 4 minutes.
Okay, great, thanks. I did find some other animals underneath my boards. They were productive with regard to the snakes and the skinks that I was trying to find. I would find some amphibians. It's a American toad right here. I got tiger salamanders. I get leopard frogs. I also had small mammals. I had Microtus. I had Blorina. I had Sorex. So I had shrews and voles underneath the boards as well. But most of the time I was finding the snakes and the skinks that I was looking for. Future plans, I'm now testing different kinds of materials. So this is an array I set up this past summer. I had 10 of them out there. So I'm comparing wood with shingles, roofing shingles, pieces of tin, some rubber matting, 2 different thicknesses of wood. So I'm going to continue on with that. You may have noticed these shiny objects underneath some of the boards in the photos that I showed you. These are eye buttons. They are temperature data loggers. So one of the things I'm interested in is looking at how the thermal environment underneath these boards might influence the use of the boards by the snakes and the skinks. So just to kind of show you, this happens to be 2 boards, number 9 and number 11, which are only about 20 meters apart from each other. Number 9 is just a wooden sign that I used. And then number 11 was that metal sign that had a fiber cord to it. And so you can see the temperature just over the course of this one day on July 3rd. And you can see that in general, relatively close together. But notice some of the temperatures do actually climb up quite high. So now we're getting up to over 36 degrees Celsius. Again, my greatest production was in the evening, so 6 o'clock or later, and in the morning times. Another thing I'm interested in is looking at the phenotypic variation among the red-bellied snakes out at the field station. These are just a few photos here showing you some of that diversity. So some individuals are relatively light brown in color. Others are much more reddish in color, and some are kind of this darker brown color. And then there's variation with regard to the striping pattern and also pattern on the head as well. So there's quite a bit of that. So I'm actually catching individuals and photographing them, and maybe that's something I can talk about next year. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
We have time for a question if anybody has one. Otherwise, you can always chat with Bruce over the chat messenger too.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
What is the battery life like on the little things, the things you are using to collect the weather data?
The eye buttons, well,
Yes.
it depends on the setting you have, how often you take the temperature. Like if you're taking the temperature every minute, they won't last as long as if you're taking the temperature once a day. I was taking temperatures every 15 minutes. I'm not exactly sure how long that will last if I do that, but it should be quite a while. So I wouldn't have an eye button run out of battery during a field season in particular. But they aren't real expensive. And so, you can always have multiple ones.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, thanks. I think we're going to move on. And if you want to ask Bruce any more questions, please just communicate through the chat. We're going to go to our next speaker, who is Roland Kays. Roland's topic today is bringing wildlife